We've all heard the phrase, practice makes perfect. Since we were children, it has been ingrained that we need to practice. But have we been practicing properly? Students and professors often feel their time is misspent. Professors spend a lot of time developing assignments, and on the other end, students spend a lot of time trying to do the work they think is expected, often with few positive results on either end. But why? In Chapter 5 of How Learning Works, authors Ambrose, Bridges, DiPietro, Lovett, and Norman open with two examples of teachers and their frustration with students. The first is a professor who assigned multiple writing assignments without clear direction or tangible feedback, in hopes students' writing skills would improve. The professor ended the term frustrated in his students' performance, as their writing did not improve. In the second illustration, lack of clarity and the teacher's failure to establish goals and expectations resulted in her students wasting time creating fancy presentations instead of presenting a clearly articulated argument. Without targeted feedback and properly articulated expectations, the students defaulted to showing their strengths where they were already proven and comfortable. So how can we fix it? In Chapter 5 of the text How Learning Works, the author's principal argument is students are more likely to succeed with appropriate levels of practice and feedback. This is especially true when they are focused on specific goals with an appropriate level of challenge, paired with quality, frequency, and feedback. Collectively, the authors have 29 years' experience and use psychology and behavioral research along with real-world scenarios to back up key principles to the merit of practice and feedback in fostering better learning. In terms of using practice and feedback to maximize learning opportunities, here's what they discovered. We'll start with practice as a tool for learning. Before we get too far, it should be mentioned that without effective communication with students, opportunities for practice and effective feedback will be lost. Professors often think they are articulating goals and objectives to their students, but unless it's in a language they understand, it won't translate. Students end up lost, and you end up frustrated. A good way to communicate exactly the type of work you do or do not want to see is by providing examples of past student work. Of course, regardless your level of communication skills with students, all the feedback in the world won't be useful unless there's an opportunity for practice. Practice is defined as any activity in which students engage their knowledge or skills. As illustrated in a number of ways in this chapter, there are good and bad ways of doing this. We grow up learning both good and bad behaviors, so as we will see, feedback, along with positive practice, is critical to successful learning. Consider two music students who are working on the same piece. One practices the areas of the piece that are most challenging, and the other practices the whole piece over and over from start to finish. Refined practice helps the first student focus on the areas that are causing the most grief, whereas the other student continues to reinforce bad habits by continuing to practice his missteps. The authors posit that establishing clear goals for students and establishing milestones that align with those goals generate opportunities for positive practice. The goals must be provided in a way that makes sense to the students. Take the example of first-year students experiencing a wake-up call during the first few weeks of school from the September 14th Faculty Focus newsletter written by Dr. Mary Ellen Weimer. In the piece, Weimer discusses several strategies about how professors can respond to the struggles of floundering students. A few of the faculty focus suggestions that align with the principles argued in Chapter 5 include offering graded assignments early. This is a good tool to show students where they stand and if there's something going wrong. Engage students in assignments that force them to practice proper test strategies. And show examples of other students' advice or assignments so students can understand in their own language what's expected. Goal-directed practice partnered with targeted feedback are critical to learning. The authors describe feedback as information given to students about their performance that guides future behavior. They argue the full potential of practice and feedback cannot be realized without combining the two, as illustrated with the cycle of practice and feedback. The illustration shows that when practice produces an observed performance, like the draft of an assignment, that in turn allows for targeted feedback, notes on where to improve the draft, and that feedback guides toward further practice, editing the draft before the final assignment is handed in. A good example of goal-directed practice and targeted feedback is the provision of a learning rubric. Learning rubrics can be a useful tool in articulating specific goals because they provide students with clear direction and define varying levels of success. Effective feedback tells students what they are or are not understanding, where their performance is going well or not so well, and how they should proceed with the next steps. The authors describe effective feedback like a map. Just like a map can tell you where you are and help you find the best way to get to your destination, effective feedback provides information about what a student already knows and can point them in the right direction towards a learning goal. The full benefits of feedback can only be realized when students have the opportunity to practice what they've been asked to improve on. There's also a fine line of how much feedback to give. You don't want to be overwhelming. There's also the matter of timing in feedback. Early and often works best as it helps students stay on track and correct mistakes before they become habit. Effective feedback should focus on the key knowledge and skills you want students to learn. Be be given at a time and frequency when students will actually use it, and be partnered with additional opportunities to practice. Make a habit of asking students how they used feedback in their work. This will help you gauge effectiveness and help the student experience the complete learning cycle discussed earlier. It is just as important to show students where they are going right as it is to show them where they're going wrong. Positive feedback shows what can be maintained and built upon, while negative feedback shows what needs to be adjusted and how. With the right guidelines, the incorporation of peer feedback can help students become better at assessing the qualities of good work while recognizing and diagnosing their own problems. As with any skill, students will need adequate practice with feedback on it to reach its full potential. The same principles of goal-oriented practice and targeted feedback can apply to our professional lives as communicators and teachers. As in the classroom, as managers and mentors, we can build effective teams by providing clear direction, assisting team members in establishing goals, setting up opportunities for success, and intervening early and often with constructive feedback on how to improve. The authors have provided the skills to move beyond the simplicity of practice makes perfect, and the more feedback, the better, in order to focus on the important features that make practice and feedback most effective. The key features of effective practice include focusing on a specific goal, targeting the right level of challenge, and the right quantity and frequency of practice so that student skills and knowledge can develop. The key features of effective feedback are that feedback communicates to students where they are and where they need to go to improve. Feedback is given to students at a time when they can make the most of it. With this dual approach, practice and feedback can work together so students can work towards a focused goal while receiving adequate feedback to get them there. When practice and feedback are carefully considered with these key features in mind, the learning-teaching process is not only more effective, but also more efficient. In conclusion, we want to end with a quote that is particularly relevant not only to the principles covered here, but also to anyone in a teaching or leadership role. In the words of Jim Yong Kim, no matter how good you think you are as a leader, my goodness, the people around you will have all kinds of ideas for how you can get better. So for me, the most fundamental thing about leadership is to have the humility to continue to get feedback and to try and get better, because your job is to try to help everybody else get better.